Good morning and welcome to Coffee with the Pastors here at Trinity Lutheran Church. So good to be with you in this April. So grab your coffee mug or whatever beverage container it is that you have and come join us. We've got a couple of special guests with us today. And so we're so excited to share with you a little bit about not only what goes on at Trinity, but also some of the wonderful new life that we have going on at Trinity in a variety of different ways. So I was thinking, Pastor Dan, this morning about April is the cruelest month, says T.S. Eliot. And I think there's been a bit of that.
Did he live in Iowa?
Yeah, the weather has been teasing us, right? And been a kind of a cruel weather month, a tornado going through, cold, snow, nice. It's been a cruel month that way, but yet at the same time, there's been exciting things happening with Lent and Holy Week and Easter and now this conversation. So I'm seeing the good things in April right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's always neat, even when the Iowa weather is weird, it's symbolic, right? I mean, we often talk about the seasons as being symbolic of life and faith, but even while the weather is weird and there's snow flurries and high winds and whatnot, there's still green shoots coming up, right? The lilies are already making their way up, in our yard, and some of the other early plants are well on their way, even though the weather hasn't been great. So yeah, life persists, new life persists, resurrection happens, right? So this is good.
There you go.
Yeah, and these two, right? These two are a great symbol of that in the life of the church.
I think so too. So I want to welcome our special guests. For those who don't know who these folks are, we've got Matthew Rossler and Hope Johnson with us today. They are both kids, I'll call you kids, that grew up at Trinity, but have also gone to seminary and are now serving their internships in different places. And so I thought it would be fun for everybody to hear a little bit more about what it's like for you guys to be on internship and what that means for you. So since I know Hope probably better than I know Matthew, maybe I'll start with you, Matt. And do you want to just tell us where you're at and what you're doing on internship? Yeah, whatever it is you want to share about that.
So I am Matthew Rossler, at Luann's son, as some of you might know me as, or Cliff's son, depending on who you ask. And I am currently serving in Canby, Minnesota, which is in the southwest corner of Minnesota, right next to the Minnesota-South Dakota border. And my internship site around me is Our Savior's Lutheran Church. I'm under the tutelage of Pastor Levi Ballarud. Almost forgot his name there for a second. Yeah, I've been working here in Canby and doing some rural ministry in some neighboring towns. And I've really enjoyed it a lot. I've never felt more called and never felt more blessed than to be here and living out that great ministry that Trinity has instilled within me so much. So, yeah.
So wait, when you say you're like doing some rural ministry too, what are your job responsibilities? I mean, what do you do? How does that work?
So a lot of it boils down to a phrase that I have taken near and dear to my heart, and that is other duties as assigned, which is a phrase that really means kind of a catch-all. I've done a lot of different things with ministry in the past months that I've been here. Wow, it's been almost 9 months now. But I have gone and done a lot of home visits. I have gone and did communion services at nursing homes and assisted living homes. I've gone and seen various parts of the rural countryside of Minnesota. and getting to meet and be a part of people's lives has been really incredible. And then there's also the standard Sunday fare, I suppose is what it is waking up early and getting the church ready and giving a sermon and doing communion and all of those other fun things that are probably very common for a pastor to be doing. And I'm learning all those ropes too. So that's been a lot of fun.
How often do you preach in your setting?
So I've been preaching 2 to 3 times a month. I think a minute twice a month. I think this week's being a little bit odd because I'm preaching on Monday, Thursday, but I'll also be preaching next month. I'll be doing some pulpit supply, so I'll be traveling around quite a bit in the area and filling in. So I'll be preaching, I think, twice at 2 different churches back to back. So that'll be fun. So, yeah.
How big is Canby? Is that a little town? I know it mostly through Pastor Jim, I think.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, this is Pastor Jim Moggleston. His father served here for quite a bit of time. And yes, I have met several people here who do remember Jim Moggleston very well. And Canby itself is roughly 1,700 people. So it's a little bit smaller than, I think, Clear Lake, I guess, would be like my best approximation, probably a little smaller than that. But I enjoyed it a lot. It's a very big town, very dedicated to wrestling, which I have learned is the passion here. So I've come to appreciate that, and still trying to learn some of the rules of wrestling and what the lingo is. And so, yeah.
There you go. The things you learn on internship, you can put appreciation of wrestling down as well. I like that.
How to make communion bread, how to serve the needs of God's people, and how to not get disqualified in a wrestling tournament. That's it. Yeah.
There you go.
That's awesome. Study your context, right? That's great.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. So, well, maybe we'll jump over here to Hope for a minute here. Hope, how about the same little rundown there? Where is it that you are serving, and what is it that you're doing on your internship?
Yeah, I am also over in Southwest Minnesota. It's funny that Matt and I came over. We're maybe an hour and a half apart, 2 hours.
Yeah, roughly 2 hours.
Yeah, I'm in the Wilmer area. And so I serve a church in Wilmer. And then I am also part-time at the Bible camp, Green Lake Bible Camp in Spicer. And so I do worship responsibilities and like youth programming and some like adult Bible studies with the church context. And then the other half of my time is getting the like summer curriculum and Bible studies written with our program team. I just facilitated a retreat of crafters, our Creative Souls retreat this past weekend. And then this upcoming summer, I'll do a lot of the spiritual care for our young adults who come as our summer staffers. And so it's been really fun to be able to get to do the traditional side of ministry, and then also getting to, I've never worked at a Bible camp. And so this Lutheran outdoor ministry setting is like a new culture for me to come into. And it's just been so fun and rewarding because I think, borrowing from the church learning and then taking from the camp learning really have been like innovative and fun for what I do here. So that's what I do.
Is that something that you intentionally wanted, or how did it come to be this kind of two-thing internship?
Yeah, so at seminary, we would talk about like a bivocational ministry setting, which is when you would have two callings. And so I have a background. I've done a couple of chaplain residencies where you go into the hospital, and I really liked that. And I knew part of my learning on internship, I wanted to know how to navigate two places. And so when we were looking at internship sites, there weren't any partnerships between a church and a hospital, but there was this one between a church and a Bible camp. And I said, well, that would sort of be a fun new way to do learning. And so, yeah, I think as we look into new models of what ministry looks like going forward, there's part of the financial reality that not all churches can afford a pastor full time. And so for me to be trained in two places so that I could potentially serve in a smaller congregation and then have another side of what my job is sort of something that we're in seminary talking about. Is that going to be what happens going forward? So I feel really fortunate that I got to do this learning, because it is hard, right? It's like two different schedules and you're busy all the time. You go from hosting a full weekend retreat into Holy Week because, camp didn't think about that it was Palm Sunday, and it's a busy time for us. So good learning.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing on internship. I always think, the fact that internship is limited in its time, it's going to be about a year, most internships, not all, but most, and that you can try some things. Like you said, even if it's hard or difficult, it's a good experience to kind of be a foundational piece or a building block for what comes next. That's one of the advantages, whether whatever you're doing is really, really fun and great, or whether it's a little bit challenging, either way, there's an end in sight. As you think about, Hope, your first call, what would be kind of an ideal first call for you, or where's your sense of call to what's next?
Yeah, so I'm doing my internship at the end of seminary, and so I'm just starting this process of having conversations with my candidacy committee and the synod about what I would do. And I really like doing sort of small group faith formation. And so I think as I look into what sort of setting I would go to, you can either go to like a big church where you get to have like a specialty, or you can go to sort of like a small family-sized church where everything is small group faith formation because there's only 40 people. And so I feel pretty open to the type of church that I would go to. So, it's sort of that mutual discernment of where the needs are and where my skills are. So I don't think I would have ever picked this internship, and it's sort of just fallen into place as this is the learning that I need to. So it feels like hopefully the Holy Spirit will continue to follow me as the first call process goes on.
One of the things that, go ahead, Kathy.
Oh, well, I was going to say that's a little different between the two of you, is that you're both on internship, but you're also in your first call process, Hope, and Matthew, you'll be going back to seminary, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
And
One
so
more
you've
year?
got another year left for.
Yeah. I will be, after my time here in Canby is done, I will be going back to seminary for my final year, and that's another year of in-class learning, and then also working on the call process. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of times people ask about seminary. I think a lot of folks in the congregation, they know that our rostered leaders are asked to do quite a bit of training before they are rostered in the church. And I think a lot of our people appreciate that. They value that. Things like the fact that we do a mix of classroom or cohort learning, but then also practical learning in a like an internship setting or a CPE setting, clinical pastoral education setting. If you had to describe what seminary is kind of about, or kind of give some insight behind the curtain, so to speak, for people of what seminary is all about, what would you say?
Okay, that's a big one. I'll dive into that. Yeah, I think seminary, sort of saw it as becoming more deeply rooted, both in the Bible as well as like our Lutheran theology and like history and doctrine. But then the whole part where you gather a lot of people that come from different contexts and perspectives for what it means. It's both like learning, doing your book learning, and then also learning how to talk about things that you feel pretty strongly about and that you hold as like your deep beliefs, and how can you talk about that with other people when they maybe have different beliefs. And then I think there's that part where once you're deeply rooted in your understanding of it, then you sort of get to experiment a little bit, and you get to say, okay, if this is at the heart of it, you know, is there innovation? Is there creative places for it? So, right, I think it's that mix of doing your contextual, your practical learning, and then being like rooted in the academic side of it. I think especially at Luther, we like that academic side of it. So, and I go to Luther Seminary in St. Paul, which is a little bit of a different context than where you were at, Matt, or you are at.
Yeah, so I'm in Wartburg Theological Seminary in Dubuque, Iowa. It's a little bit different, but I think a lot of those core pieces are still there. There's very much a dedication to the foundation, theology, church history, liturgy, and really exploring a lot of those traditions that make Lutheranism. And I think there is a vested interest at Wartburg at, what's the phrase I want to use? Shedding light on ideas that you might already have about the church or about theology, and realizing that those preconceived notions are not always accurate. But then there is, as you go through that the process and you spend time at seminary, you realize that maybe those personal ideas that you had, they can grow and they can become something new. And it's fascinating for me personally to see how in my seminary journey, I've learned how to incorporate some of my own things that I really enjoy talking about or learning about, and finding new ways to put them into ministry contexts. And so that's a lot of theory-heavy discussion, but there's also plenty of practical learning involved too. How to do the words of institution for communion, how to hold a group conversation, how to visit people who are in need of pastoral care and love, and how to see the world as Jesus saw it, as full of God's children. So, yeah.
Wow, great answers, both of you. Wow.
That's a lot. Yeah. And I have to say that what I heard both of you talking about is that seminary is a place where you get a sense of what the church was and is and always will be, but also that the church is changing, and I think about, my seminary education, 40 years ago, and yet how much I've learned having kids, 2 children and a daughter-in-law go through seminary, and how much they have informed me about some of the trends in the ELCA and where we're going and the possibilities of how church will be the same, but also how church will have to be different as we move into the future. And so, yeah, I've appreciated that, learning a little vicariously through my children. They have kept me up more than, quite honestly, I might have been as a pastor here in Trinity in Northeast Iowa, because sometimes it feels like we're a little sheltered from some of the changes that are going on in the church and what that all means. So, yeah, appreciate that. Yeah.
What would you each say about the future of the church? I think that's another thing, as people that are right on the cusp of entering into professional ministry, so to speak. But what do you, if you had to make some predictions, or if you just some trends in general, or maybe hopes or aspirations, what would you say about the future of the church?
I'll jump in first, since Hope jumped in beforehand. I think that it's I see it as a place of continuous growth. And I think that as the United States and as the world continues to grow and change in unexpected ways, so too will the church. I think that some of the best classes I've had at seminary have really been highlighting how we as students and future church leaders, pastors, deacons, lay ministers, what have you, have really taken to understanding that the church is always in motion, and that just because we have had one Reformation 500 years ago, we still carry that same reformational spirit and that same willingness to see new ways of old traditions, but also incorporating those same old traditions that keep us grounded in God's message of grace and faith in Jesus Christ. So I think that as the ELCA continues to move and continues to change, there's a lot of uncertainty, but I don't see that uncertainty as something to be pessimistic about. But I will admit, it can be a little intimidating and a little scary, but I think it's also an incredible adventure that's waiting to happen.
Yeah, I think as I think about the church moving forward, I think obviously the pandemic really disrupted a lot of how things are doing. And I think it brought to the forefront just how much like loneliness and isolation, especially in this like digital area, has shifted how we engage together. And so I think as I've talked to, you know, the older generation, both at Trinity and in my current church at Vinci, they talk about how it was the center of their community and it was like the second family. And I think in some ways we became really big and we sort of moved away from the church being a place of home. And I think as we're moving forward, it's sort of hearkening back to that of saying like, we want a place where we're deeply known, right? Because we can do our, you know, we can volunteer with nonprofits and we can have our TED Talks if we're interested in like bettering ourselves or our books. But there is something about a church community that's right, a transformed way of living that I feel really hopeful about. And I think that we have this deep connection to it. Like we've done it in the past and we have elders who knew what it was like to really rely on one another, and that's what people are missing, right, is that connection. So I feel hopeful that the church is like well suited going forward to meet the needs of a lot of people.
I'm really glad that my daughter Hope is hopeful. Thank you. Living up to your name there, honey.
Yeah. Thanks, Mom.
Oh, that's great though. Thank you both. That's really,
Yeah.
really good.
But and then that's a beautiful testimony to I think how we understand really, you know, fits with our Lent theme, that it's really about connections and relationships. And that's one of the things that we offer people in the church that is unique. Along with Jesus and all of our belief is that place where we can be known and loved as we are. So yeah. So Pastor Dan took you forward. I want to take you backward for a second here. So I think it'd be really fun for the folks at Trinity to hear if there's anything particular about Trinity that you experienced as you were here that might have helped you to think about or a ministry as something that might be a career for you.
I can go. I think I came home after college for a gap year before I went on to do my Yagam year in Hungary. And during that time, I volunteered and got really plugged in with like the quilters and the crocheters and the Wednesday Live. And so, or Wednesday Night Alive. And so I think for me, there was this part of connecting at church with specifically women who are really living out their faith through service. And so I started the seminary process as a deacon, which would be called to word and service. And a lot of that was seeing how deeply spiritual serving is for so many people at Trinity. And then I think from that, I really saw myself as like, okay, well, if we're called to service, we're also called to care for those people who are serving, which is how I ended up in this more pastoral role. But right, it was Iona teaching me how to tie for the quilting, and it was Fran Cates sitting with me on the couch down in the fellowship hall, teaching me how to do those prayer shawls. And then we were talking about lives, and we were talking about God, and it was like, oh, this is a really cool opportunity to do ministry in a way that I saw myself going forward as a leader in ministry.
So how Trinity came to motivate me towards ministry is that I can still remember probably my junior and senior year in high school, whenever I'd go to pick up my mom, Luann. I think specifically on Fridays, I would come into Pastor Dan's office, and I'm sure you remember, I'd ask you a couple of questions about theology, about the nature of God. And you gave me a book that I actually still have. I need to give it back to you. So sorry about that. But I remember you jokingly told me, although I think you were also a little serious, that I should just go to seminary and get those answers for myself. So there is that, but I also think that some of the other leadership in the church has also motivated me a lot. Bishop Kevin, when he was here, was a great mentor, and so is Pastor Kathy. You got me started in going and visiting people in the hospital and providing pastoral care that way. That was my first experience with that. And then, of course, Marcy Colvin, who was youth director and really another mom to me in a lot of ways, helping me feel connected to the church. So, and then, of course, my own mom, being the great church secretary that she is, our church administrative assistant, volunteering me for everything, and that was great. That was a benefit. I won't lie. So,
well, I think Trinity, the people of Trinity, saw in both of you pretty early on, maybe even earlier than you did, gifts for ministry. You know, we never know exactly where God is going to lead us, right, in those gifts, but I think the church certainly saw in both of you great possibilities for that. And I think a lot of those folks are probably not that surprised to see you where you are at this point. And we're just really grateful for both of you and the remarkable gifts that you are already bringing to God's church. It's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I'll just say ditto to all of that. I think so. I think, Hope had to overcome the, let's not be like my mother kind of thing. But, quite honestly, Matt, my mother was the church secretary, so that's how I got into it. So there's something to be said for all of the different ways that people are exposed to church and then feel that calling, whether they have a parent involved actively or not. So but anything else that you would like to share with us? Because this has certainly been a blessing to me, and I think it will be a blessing to so many folks that are listening with us this morning or whenever it is that they watch Coffee with the Pastors. But I don't want to cut you short, but I know you're busy people too.
Yeah, I think just deep appreciation, and it sounds like you just don't always know the impact that you're having on the young people at church and what seeds are being planted as we go. Because I know I felt so cared for and loved throughout growing up at Trinity, growing older at Trinity.
Yeah, I think getting to spend time at Trinity has been a really big blessing, and I am always grateful for all of the days that I got to spend there and I know I make light of it sometimes and I joke about it, but I really do. Those are some of my treasured memories of my childhood and my young adult formation years is Trinity and the ministry that I've seen there and that feeling of acceptance. So.
Mhm.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much to both of you, and blessings to you in the future. Certainly believe that the Holy Spirit has been leading you all the way along, as Pastor Den said earlier, than you may have recognized, and will continue to do so as you move forward on this journey. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care, you guys. Yep.
Bye. Wow, that was kind of fun.
Yeah, it just gives you hope for the future, right? It's always great to be able to talk with, I think, seminarians, especially as they're getting closer to leaving the seminary process, and to see the way that they've grown and changed. But also, I mean, I'm just so grateful for for Trinity, and the way that this congregation has really, I think, worked intentionally at trying to identify and encourage future leaders in the church, not only for rostered ministry, but also for lay leadership in the church, that as youth are leaving and moving to other places, that they're thinking about the ways that they can be a part of God's work wherever they're at. That's a really important thing for the future, no matter what the church looks like. And to have, now I think a handful, almost a half dozen of seminary students in the last 10 to 15 years has just been really great to see here, and something that I know we really celebrate, right? That's just so fantastic. So
It is, but even in my time at Trinity, I think that that's an identity that we did not have when I first started, and yet now have kind of grown into this, because we, quite frankly, haven't had a lot of kids growing up in Trinity that pursued the ministry. And the one person that I know is my age or older, that oftentimes we talk about as. So to really do what they talked about, is that all of these seeds are being planted, and to recognize that sometimes it is that question of, gosh, I see some gifts in you, and have you ever thought about seminary?
yeah, that can be, that's enough sometimes, right? Just
That's right. Yeah. I mean, that was one of those things that happened to me when I was in confirmation. Somebody saw some gifts in me and thought, gosh, too bad you're a woman and a girl, because you can't be a pastor, but you could be a good one.
wow. Yeah.
So I think those, we don't often realize how that can be very formative for folks. But
Absolutely.
yeah. But as you also said, it's also that recognizing of changing seasons in the church life, and that's part of who we are as well in the church. There are exciting things that are changing around here. The weather is changing, seasons are changing. So yeah, we've got a lot of change and transition on the docket for us. Not to mention just change with Pastor Daniel Hanson coming on board here. So
Yeah.
Maybe we should mention a little bit about that change in seasons here.
Yeah, it feels like we haven't talked about it for a little while now, because we had the call meeting, what was it, almost 2 months ago now. And so we've kind of focused in on Lent and know that he's on the way. But yeah, we want to remind folks that now we're not that far away from his beginning. He's wrapping up his call at his churches in Hampton here in these couple of weeks, and then is going to take a little bit of time to transition and move and those kind of things. But we expect that he'll be with us for the first time on May 15th. So coming up pretty quick, and maybe around a little bit before that, around the office and whatnot, but the first time on a weekend should be May 15th. And as we've done in the past with new pastors, we like to kind of give them a chance to ease in, right? I mean, I think we've all gone through that. As pastors moving to a new call, it's a lot of work, honestly, to say goodbye well, it's a very emotional kind of work when you've had these great relationships with a congregation. It's not easy to say goodbye to people, even when you feel called somewhere else. And then to jump into a new place, especially a place like Trinity, we both went through that, where it's like, oh my goodness, there's so much. There's just so many people, so much happening. It's a lot to kind of transition into. And Daniel's really excited and eager to get going, but we're going to kind of let him ease into it and have some couple of weeks before he's in the pulpit for the first time, and just kind of get a chance to get his office set up and meet some people and begin kind of getting the rhythm of what that call will look like here. So that'll be May really for him, and we're excited obviously to have him come on board. We've been working at this transition really since June, since the bishop's election. So really exciting to have that almost completed, and to have him join our team. So
Yeah, it will be 11 months, that we've been more or less trying to figure out how we were going to keep doing this, and
which is actually pretty fast in the church world, at least in the ELCA at 11-month opium. I mean, that's not bad at all, because it doesn't always happen that quickly. So
but it takes time, and I think that's the luxury that we have as being a larger congregation with multi-staff, is that if you're the only person in a church, boom, it's you and it's all you right then. And so to be able to let him kind of ease in and figure it out, because it can be overwhelming. Gosh, I remember cutting up flashcards of old directories, trying to learn people's names, just as simple as that.
Yeah, I remember feeling like I'd never learn all the names. It's just too many people.
Right.
But
now I know names and relationships. It's exciting how you're related to one another.
and where they sit in worship, right? I mean, that's the now the next level is when you start to go, and I think they're at that service, and that probably freaks people out to hear us say that, but it's true, right? I mean, it's
they think it's funny when I say, I know halfway back on the lectern side.
I think it's a good strategy for increasing worship attendance. We tell people that we know where they sit at what service. Well,
and it's springtime and it's a busy season. When you get into the end of April, you just start feeling like May, and we've got some exciting things happening in my world in May, with the trip to Pella and the May breakfast and some fun things. But I imagine, one, happy belated birthday. April is the cruelest month because you have aged, since
I have.
But you've also got busy family things going on, probably with your girls. What's happening with them in this spring that we've had?
Well, I think like a lot of families, especially ones with kids that are in the junior high school range like ours are, this has been a spring of, I think in some ways this whole school year has felt like a normal pace again, and there was that kind of that ramp up to doing all of the things right with all of the activities. But I think particularly this spring, it's just like with the COVID cases subsiding, it's like we're back to doing things in a normal way even again. And so that in one way that feels really great to be able to go to concerts that are full of people and travel for all of the sports stuff and have all of the church activities for youth up and running again, those kind of things. But it's also, it's been pretty busy. We've been going to soccer tournaments, and we've been trying to go to track meets. The weather hasn't helped with that too much, so we've had a bunch of them canceled. And our high schooler is doing all of the music and all of the drama stuff and speech and all of those things happening. And it is that point of the school year. I think a lot of families we certainly feel like, you get into late April and May, and it's like you are almost to the end, and it's like all of the last things you're squeezing in before the school year wraps up. And this is the first time we've done this in a couple of years at that pace. So definitely looking forward to summer and and the wrap of that. But it's been a great school year. It's been fun to have the kids be able to do the things that we would all expect and want them to be able to do. It's been good. So.
Yeah, I remember that, having 4 kids and all of them pretty close together. Oh my gosh, those spring months as things were wrapping up, but just so many music things and sports things, and they just kind of all seem to converge in these months, and it can be such a busy time in life. But like in all things, that that season has passed for me, and I'm in a different season of life. But I've always appreciated Ecclesiastes, that for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. And I embrace that as a young mom, and I still embrace it at the age that I'm at, that, it is seasons come, seasons go, life keeps happening, to a certain extent, you have to live in the moment and appreciate the season for what it is, and then recognize that there will be another season and it will have another dynamic, but it's all good, and God is all a part of that. So
it is so true, right? I mean, you do realize that the only constant is change, right? That as much as we like to kind of fool ourselves to think that things are static, because I think that sometimes when we like things the way they are, we want to think that it's going to stay that way, that it doesn't change. But the reality is things are always shifting and moving, as Matt and Hope talked about in relation to the church, but it really applies to all of life. It's always in change, just like the seasons in Iowa are always in change. You don't like the weather today, like they say, you wait a little while, it'll be different.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So yeah, we know that definitely in nature, and particularly this time of year. But the beautiful thing about this time of year is that we're watching all of the new shoots and all the new life coming. And so that maybe is the wrap up for this Coffee with the Pastor, is go outside, take a look at those new shoots coming up, because we are in the midst of changing seasons, but God will provide and new life is happening.
Right on. It's great last word.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. You know what? Next month, we'll have Pastor Daniel with us. So we'll be back to 3 Coffee with the Pastors. So y'all turn in, and we'll see you next month.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.